Hello and welcome to Football Follies. We're going to crown a football champion, and we have the NFL and college football follies. Hi, I'm Phil, along with Ari and Andrew. Welcome to AAi, the podcast on the business of analytics and pro sports. Hey, Andrew, how you doing?
I'm pretty well. How are you, Phil?
I am doing fine. And Andrew, look at Ari with the Indy 500 revved up and roaring over his shoulder. Hey, Ari, how are you?
Hey, everyone. How are you?
Well, guys, off the bat, we got to crown a champion here. We actually have a football champion. Andrew, we know that's leading to you. Take it away.
Yeah, after many months, the Champions League completed successfully with somewhat of an unexpected champion. We knew it was going to be unexpected. No one expected Bayern Munich and PSG. Very few people expected them to be in the finals, but Bayern Munich won. Great story for Germany. Great story for all the hard work that happened in Germany to allow them to be the first league to restart in European football. And great top to a rather strange season for Bayern. But yes, we've made it through and we're basically ready to start again.
Wonderful. And then we just can't let go too much time with Ari. Ari, go ahead and crown our new winner of the Borg Warner Trophy in Speedway, Indiana, since you have them right over your shoulder.
Takuma Sato was the winner. Great to see it. It was the smallest race purse or winning for almost 30 years, I believe, due to the pandemic and lack of fans. But it was about 1.3, 1.4 million plus car. I would take that myself, but he gets all the fame and fortune and glory for his life.
Well, and we tip our cap again to the Penske Corporation. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway grounds look immaculate. I grew up there. I've been to that place a lot, and it never looked more spectacular. So well done all the way around. Now, guys, that's the most simply said thing we may say all day on this podcast. We crown a champ, we hand out a trophy. Because if we take a look at the NFL, right away, we have to say this, 77 false positives, including one of the coaches who believed he had it for about 4 hours before. Imagine the panic, because he's got a family, they just moved. There's a lot of chaos right now in the NFL with the season about to kick off. How do we square this up, guys? 77 positives. Some of the teams really are still trying to sort out whether they're going to have fans or not. This is not the way you want to kick off an NFL season, is it, Andrew?
This is horrifying, right? And Stefanski has pre-existing conditions that place him at risk as well. I can't imagine what he was going through and what his family was going through. I look at this and I just have no idea how the NFL is going to make it through. Okay, so there's a problem with the lab and the test that was being done at that lab. But they were staking their entire policies on successfully being able to execute these tests. There has to be massive scrambles within the NFL right now, because until they get this understood and know that they have a test that works, I don't know how they even kick off the season. I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk about, we asked about the Major League Baseball season and whether or not would complete. And I need to give Phil full credit. I think he's right. They're going to, at the very least, limp through the season. It's what you called, Phil. I and Ari, I think, were much more pessimistic. It looks like, fingers crossed, we're going to see it. I have even less confidence the NFL can make it through an entire season, especially with this sort of thing going on. To be perfectly honest, when the first results came out and there was this massive number of positive tests around the league, my first thought wasn't any doubt, right? My first thought was, yeah, that seems reasonable. And we don't even know if it's true. We don't know how many people are actually sick right now. But the fact that I wasn't surprised gives me a feeling that we're going to see outbreaks in football.
Yeah, so what we're talking about now might be the most simple thing about the NFL season, because the deeper you go into it, the more convoluted. All right, we're still trying to sort out. So the Chiefs Cowboys, Colts, Jags, and maybe the Dolphins will have friends and maybe have home field advantage. That's so unusual. Wow.
Yeah, no, it's kind of interesting, and just watching other sports play where, Toronto is in Buffalo. It's not your traditional home stadium. You have to be in a hotel. Some may have fans, some don't. You almost have to just throw it out the window. Um, uh, the Marlins having a lot of games off, the Cardinals having a lot of games off. May see that in football as well. So it's just one of those years where there may be imbalance in what otherwise would be fairness, and just have to play through it.
Well, Andrew, Ari just hit the nail on the head. Think of it this way. The St. Louis Cardinals in baseball just played some games without Yachty. Can you imagine the Chiefs playing without Mahomes? Or just name, the other upper echelon quarterbacks, or that game-breaking receiver, or that rush end, and all of a sudden you're playing without them. That doesn't just distort a betting line, that destroys any normalcy in any one weekend of an NFL season.
Well, I mean, absolutely. This is part of the problem when we look at the Major League Baseball season, is that, I don't even know what this stuff means, right? You see the kind of schedule the Mets are facing, or the Cardinals are facing, with multiple doubleheaders, just constant days, no days off. Even with the players healthy and on the field, it becomes really hard to forecast, especially when you get double headers and you're bringing pitchers up for that one game. It's challenging. But over the course of 60 games, you hope something evens out. The NFL is all about one game. And yeah, you're right. If Pat Mahomes goes out for, the first couple weeks, and all of a sudden the Chiefs start in a hole, what happens to them? And then even worse, I think, from an NFL perspective, is what happens if he goes out in that first round of the playoffs and isn't able to perform? What does that even mean about the eventual champion of the Super Bowl? This is a weird time. I see lots of people doing forecasts for lots of different sports, and there's so much uncertainty right now. Yeah, it's a really tough time to be sports betting.
Well said. Now, guys, think of this. We're fans, and we work in the industry. The link of fantasy and sports betting right now with pure competition it's the same. So let's look at and here's what I mean by that. Last year, if you look at the NFL season, I really enjoyed two storylines. The Chiefs, excellence, of course. Andy Reid, Mahomes on the field, excellence. The Buffalo Bills, in terms of pure competition, were just a thrill to watch compete. That was a phenomenal, good story to watch. But if we look at where things stand today with pro football, college football, and all of the uncertainty, now, and then we mix in sports betting, think of this. ESPN and Caesars just announced a new studio, not just a new show, a new studio in Las Vegas this week. ESPN expanding sports betting content. Their show that they hang their hat on is the Daily Wager. It'll be at a new studio beginning week number 1 of the NFL, and then they're doing more sports betting themed product, both online and over the air or over cable. No way in the middle of that there's anything of what you just said, and there's no way. We don't know who the week number 1 starting quarterbacks are going to be, right? I mean, think of this. Ari, could you today say, I know who's going to be the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick? We don't know.
Yeah,
right?
You can guess, but yeah, you don't know. It's a couple weeks away. It's too many variables.
Right. So we think normal. Cam Newton's going to. No, we don't know if Cam Newton and Andrew. That's really to your point. And you can go do the same thing with college football. I mean, was it North Carolina State? ACC's trying to hang in there. North Carolina State shuts down all fall sports. They have not 1 or 2, but 3 virus clusters on campus, including the football team. And then you've got programs like Louisville and a couple of the others. I think Ole Miss trying to predict or say we want to have fans. I think the University of Miami is trying to say we want to have fans, but only about 20%. Andrew, can you set a line on that? Can you adjust it every day? Can you calculate all of what that mayhem means to sports betting and football as we enter the season?
I mean, can you set a line? Absolutely, right. And I can be tracking what the fans are saying. And I mean, for a lot of fans, I think you can continue to bet and try to do well. I think a lot of fans bet on their team, their favorite player, in part because it gives them a little more enthusiasm. I think this is much harder for the professionals, right? The ones who are looking for an edge, the ones who are building really complicated models behind the scenes, trying to take into account everything, including the weather forecast, right? I think it's much harder for them to place their bets at the beginning of the week when it's so much more uncertain, right? There's always risk. The NFL always has had injury risk. You'll have players unable to compete on Sunday because they got hurt during the week. I just think you're going to see more of that. I'd like to go back a little bit because you talk about the Daily Wager and the ESPN studio, and we do have to acknowledge that one of the reasons the NFL is the most popular sport in America today is not just sports betting, but fantasy betting. And one of the things I've seen really interesting is people are beginning to talk about their fantasy football leagues. And I've seen a number of people who have been running leagues for 30 years. And they're saying they're refusing to run the league this year because of the uncertainty in exactly this. And what their concern is, they believe if they were to run the league, they'd destroy friendships over the fights about what do you do when my star quarterback isn't available this week, or I picked the Patriots defense as my defense, and it turns out that their middle linebacker and captain is unable to go, or 5 players on the defense are unable to go. And I think this is a real risk for the people who are doing this in what is supposed to be friendly competition, that you almost need the NBA's plan of how do we mitigate against a COVID outbreak just to manage a fantasy sports league right now.
You know, guys, we knew about a month and a half ago that we'd get into something like this at some point, right? Where all these storylines, the news of the virus, the pure competition, playoffs, meaningful games, sports betting, fantasy would all merge or morph at one time. We just didn't know it was going to happen this week in the manner in which it has. Good point, Andrew. That's great stuff. And in fact, it's not just here in the States either. We opened by talking about soccer in Europe. And before we get into halfway through the Major League Baseball season, we have to talk about the KBO. This could be one of the worst weeks for the virus in Korea, and critical for the KBO. There were, I think, what was it, over 300 new cases, and the most were in Seoul, which is where most of the KBO teams. So let's call that an exaggerated view of what could still happen to Major League Baseball. And Ari, that is a tough, and in fact, that's an ominous way of saying we are halfway through the Major League Baseball season. And so, Ari, you get the first word. We're halfway through. What's your dominant thought right now, halfway through the MLB season?
Yeah, well, a couple of thoughts. Well, with MLB, it looks like things are still going strong. There have been, the Cardinals, Marlins shut down for extended periods, and they just cancel or push games off into the future, and we'll figure it out. So they're kind of plowing through. There's been a rash of pitching injuries, probably due to, the shortened or lack of, traditional spring training to get players ready. But those are some of the dominant thoughts. Well, we may want to talk about Anaheim in a bit, but, the low of them compared to the high of the Dodgers is remarkable. And then looking at the KBO, my thought on that is 324 new cases. And I look out my window, I'm in Lincoln Park, Chicago. I don't know the numbers, but we have more than 324 cases probably within a square mile of my home. and they play kickball without masks for like 2-hour games, all close by to each other. So my thought is kudos to Korea for taking things seriously.
Um, well, guys, halfway through, the Los Angeles Dodgers look like it's going to be the Dodgers against everybody else in the World Series. They're strong and deep, and they finally got out of Walker Buehler an outing, and we've been tracking him because we believe him to be not only their best pitcher, but a real linchpin for the season. He struck out 11 in 6 innings. Fellas, I watched him, and I was thinking, I'm seeing greatness. Andrew, the Dodgers really look strong, and acquiring Mookie Betts from the Red Sox looks like a stroke of genius and certainly worth every penny.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was one of the best teams over the last couple of years, and they just got stronger in what they did. It's an astonishing team right now. Absolutely.
Well, and so we're talking about pitching, and we'll bounce back and forth. If we talk hitting, all right, we've got to go to the guys in your backyard. The South Side Hitmen or back. It's amazing what Abreu has led and what the team has done and what Abreu is doing right now. The White Sox are legit. They're in this thing.
Yeah, it's great to see their also that their record follows suit. They have, some veterans. They have, some youth, Moncada, Anderson, Koichel. They've done a lot of good things, and it's good to see, Abreu have that breakout. But a lot of people surrounding, they haven't had the easiest schedule either. But it's great that there's a good chance we'll have 2 playoff teams in Chicago.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated by Abreu. 7 home runs in 7 games. The club 27 home runs in a week's worth of games. That is really rolling the pole, and those are good stories. So here's the Dodgers, the favorite. The White Sox are emerging as one of those young teams that's a surprise. On a personal level, perhaps the biggest surprising individual player this entire season is a guy who plays right field for the San Francisco Giants. And Ari, you know him well from when he first entered the league. So take it away, partner.
Yastrzemski, not the grandfather, but his grandkid. We drafted him with the Baltimore Orioles and saw some things in him. It's great to have the same name as somebody, but we saw that, this person could develop into an everyday major league player, and he certainly has. Mind you, shortened season, already 20 runs scored, 20 RBIs, 20 walks, 20 extra base hits, leading the majors in offensive WAR, which to me is more important than ribbies. And, the only player just behind Fernando Tatis Jr. with 28 runs scored and leads the National League with 23 walks. So put it that way, he walks a lot. He gets a lot of extra base hits. He scores, which is a credit to his teammates. So, yeah, I really enjoyed seeing that. And just to do a shout out more for the Orioles and the selections, Dan Duquette, myself, many others did. I saw this interesting stat. We were talking about the Dodgers. If you look at Betts, Bellinger, Turner, and Seager, they actually have fewer lower batting average, home runs, and ribbies than the Orioles Santander, Severino, Alberto, and Nunez. So you don't have to be on a big league team or have all the media following you to be just as effective. So I'm proud of some of those lesser known people that are going to grow into players that a lot of people will hear. A lot of them may be traded from the Orioles, or a lot of them may have success with the Orioles, but you'll be hearing those names in years to come. And Yastrzemski is a great one as well.
Well, and amazing for the Giants and for the O's. A week ago, guys, I mean, with the Giants, I thought they were down for the count a week ago, but a week later, here at the halfway point, and things get very seriously, very quickly in big league baseball. The Giants appear to be at least on the fringe, if not in the hunt the rest of the way. We'll see, because each week has brought surprises and the pressure's on big leaguers. I love this time when we get close to watch big leaguers play, and it's been fun to see them perform. Now, a couple of trends here. Andrew, analytics trend. Catchers are being paired with the same home plate umpire more than ever in the recent history of Major League Baseball. That sounds unusual, but there's an explanation for that, right?
Well, absolutely. I think this all comes down to the analytics. We've been constantly looking as a community for better ways to understand how catchers impact the game, and how they are able to influence the game and how we can make them more effective, right? And we talk about this with the rise of pitch framing, but it just makes sense that everything a catcher does is influenced or is influencing the home plate umpire behind them, from how they frame a pitch and how that interacts with an umpire, to even how they call a game and how the pitch sequence and so on is going to influence the way the umpire performs. We know the umpires are human and they're not all equivalent in the way they call strikes or the amount they call strikes. And so it makes sense both to understand what the umpires are going to do, what their tendencies are, and how to take advantage of it, but also how the umpire reacts to the way the catcher catches the pitch. And even the umpire's familiarity with the catcher is going to influence their ability to call the game. So it makes perfect sense to take advantage of those sorts of things. As you understand one another's tendencies, there's obviously advantages.
Yeah, guys, I like the way we sift the numbers to just see what we can get out of them. But all right, there's another explanation in this, and it has to do with what we didn't know would be an unintended consequence of the cluster. And that's that just the same crews are there with the same guys. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. We didn't know that. We weren't thinking that back when we had summer, spring training, right?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. You know, you do the battery of the catcher pitcher, but you could also do the battery based on who the umpire, the home plate umpire is. And, you know, getting familiarity with, you know, one of the unwritten rules of the game, which has gotten a lot of popularity and discussion this week, is umpires not just calling balls and strikes, but kind of learning it the first batter or two during the game, where they set, you know, they kind of set the pitch, or in other words, they paint themselves in a corner where if they call a pitch a strike, they almost feel obligated to keep it up to be consistent the rest of the game. But when you have the same, you know, crew, umpiring crew, you know, they repeat at home plate, you know, you already established that. So that could affect dynamics as well.
A couple of the biggest surprises of the season so far, the Orioles. Ari, thanks for helping us dig in there. Mike Yastrzemski with the Giants. David Fletcher with the Angels. If we were to talk about two of the most all-around successful contributors offensively this year at the beginning of the year, I don't think we would have said Mike Yastrzemski, right fielder of the Giants, or David Fletcher, the third short second baseman for the Angels. But we have. And then, guys, we were talking about this before we went on. I live here on the West Coast. I love watching the Angels because on any one 5 to 10 minute during their broadcast, you get to see Mike Trout followed by Anthony Rendon followed by Shohei Ohtani. That's phenomenal. They're three different kinds of hitters, and anyone that loves baseball, watch an Angels game and just sit and watch how those guys do it. Okay. Trout rarely swings the first pitch, but then about once every 2 or 3 games, he clobbers the first pitch and it's usually gone. So he serves warning. Rendon has an approach that is textbook. He's aggressive, but he's so calm and relaxed he's so simple in his approach. It understates just how talented he really is, and he drives the ball. He gets his pitch, he drives it. And then Ohtani, I look at him and say, you know, he's a big guy. He's not a little guy, yet he nearly runs as fast as Trout. He beats out infield. He and Trout put a lot of pressure on infielders. You bobble the ball, they're safe. And then Ohtani this past week was kind of interesting. One day he was clearly pulling off, and he leaves the party early with his lead elbow, shoulder, and hip. And it was obvious to where the Angels broadcasters were mentioning it. Mark Gubiza and Victor were talking about it. Literally the next day, his first at bat, he drives one 440, and you could just see that someone had mentioned something to him about, you're pulling off, and that's just how talented he is. Think that he makes one minor adjustment and he nearly hits 450. They're amazing and a lot of fun, and I enjoy that just as a fan, as someone who's in the industry. All right, let's transition to the NBA playoffs and NHL playoffs. And in the NBA, all right, we'll talk about just up the road from Chicago and Milwaukee. Giannis is amazing. He's the first in playoff history to average 30 points, 15 rebounds, and 5 assists through his team's first 4 playoff games. Garnett, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Wilt the Stilt, they all did it through 3. Giannis, amazing. But he's not the only guy. Luka Doncic, the third player in NBA history, with a 40-point, 15-rebound, 10-assist game. Barkley and the Big O, Oscar, did the same thing. The NBA playoffs are advancing to round 2, not quite yet, but it's been a pleasure to watch some of those games. Guys, just a quick observation from each one of you. How much have you had a chance to play, and what has fascinated you so far about the first round of the NBA playoffs?
I mean, I'm just blown away at how well they're playing, how exciting the game is. I mean, we talked about it a little bit last week. The ratings are down. The NBA is hurting from a TV perspective, but I think the game's the most fun it's been in years. So I think that the thing that still strikes me is that difference, that disconnect between what people are watching and what's actually happening on the court.
And then, Ari, if you were to sit down and watch an NBA game, what would you be looking for right now the rest of the playoffs?
Well, I've been following it very closely with my son, watching while working, but mostly watching 6 hours a day. They're really thrilling. You got the overtime buzzer beater. You get players just doing fantastic. All around. The one disappointment was a couple teams, kind of out early, either 4-0 or 4-1. So I was hoping to have some of the rounds go deeper. But yeah, we're talking about the Bucks. They have been dominant last year, this year. So I think they're an exciting team to watch.
Yeah, the Pacers were one of those teams that went 4-out, but they're missing their all-star big man Sabonis. In the NHL playoffs, we're on to the second round, and we can really look at the odds-on favorites to get to the next round, but it's not always that simple, is it, Andrew?
No, and this has always been my disconnect in the NHL, and I'll be honest, I have not modeled the Stanley Cup playoffs, in part because everything's so up in the air. I don't even know how you handle the way they're playing in a bubble and the risks that may be there and so on. Right, but people are looking at the Islanders, Lightnings, Knights, and Avalanche to advance. And when you look at the odds in Vegas, right, they're overwhelming odds in favor of these favored teams. But if you go back and you look at the NHL playoffs and you try to model it, it's oftentimes much closer than it really looks like. NHL games are hard to model. It's such a low-scoring sport. It only takes a couple mistakes on the part of the favored team or a couple of exceptional plays on the part of the underdog to completely transfer a game. And then all of a sudden you have a completely different series. So while you look at it, and some of these teams are, overwhelming favorites, not even just to get out of this round, but to make it out of the conference, I'd be careful. I just think it's not as clear cut as those numbers make it appear.
All right. Well, guys, we're about to wrap up. Last thing, nearly 60% of Americans reportedly will drop or punt their gym membership after the pandemic is over. They have learned to deal without it. And to that, I say chocolate chip cookies for everybody. And Andrew, where you live, there's a chocolatier. Nicole's Swiss Bliss is in San Diego County, North County. And she is a Swiss native living here in the States. You need look up Nicole's Swiss Bliss. She makes chocolate in a homemade kitchen. They're like the best truffles and chocolate chips ever in the history of mankind. They're the absolute best. Actually, have some in the kitchen right now.
I'll have to look, but I mean, I can't say I'm really that surprised because we know so many people sign up for gym memberships in January and then never use them the rest of the year. So maybe people have just realized that and figured out either how to do this or how to go without. On the other hand, it sounds like it's hard to get a hold of dumbbells if you're looking for setting up your own weight training in your house.
Well, guys, that'll do it for this week. We're in the thick of it. It's a real pleasure always, guys, to spend this time together. And with you, our viewers and our listeners, we've been blessed by increased viewership over the last month or consistently. So thanks for hanging out with us. We'll catch up with you in a week when we're just about a week away from the National Football League getting underway, college football about to get underway. And then as we go deeper into the last 2 weeks of the baseball season, this will only have a more fun, all the more to talk about. That's it for right now. We'll say goodbye to Andrew and Ari. Thanks, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. And that's it for us here on AAi, the podcast about analytics in the business of sports. Bye-bye now.